In this podcast, we're going to talk about how to remove edge halos when we're working with a blue screen or green screen. Let me go ahead and disable these notes so you can see what I'm talking about. All right, select this and hit 1. Now, I have different techniques in order to go over how we could actually fix the issues, and you will see that there's more than one way of actually approaching the problem and fixing that problem. And each of those individual setups will actually give you a slightly different result. Now, the idea is to kind of achieve the best key possible, retaining the most amount of detail around the edge. Now, nothing's stopping you from actually eating away some of the edges in order to be able to remove that information and still read in the image correctly. Now, one of the ways that I'm going to go ahead and remove this is I'm going to show you very quickly what I did. And this is pretty much with the issue. And as soon as I reactivate these guys, you will see it that pretty much we solve that problem and we still retain the edge on the other side completely. So let me go ahead and show you this most basic setup so you guys can kind of follow a little bit along and understand a little bit more what I'm doing. But again, like I said, there's multiple setups that actually achieve the same result. So let's go ahead and with this one that kind of keeps the most amount of detail around the edges and actually keep volume on one side versus the other. So let's go ahead and start very quick. So the first thing that I have is my original plate. And from here, I have two specific outputs. And I'm going to discuss this side in a second, but I'm going to start with the mat. So what I did for the mat, I just went ahead and did one single pry mat, which I used the crop box to actually get rid of all the dirt on either side of my green screen. Then I went ahead and created a very quick key, the same as you guys are doing, as stipulated on the podcast, and just try to get at that as much as possible. I didn't clean anything on the edges. I kind of retained the dirt on the edges. But if I go down, you will see that there's no holes on my, only for minor holes that those don't really matter on my mat. And if I go up, there's very minute dirt around, nothing that is really important. When I go back to my default one, you will see that it's a very nice clean key. Now that I have this information, when I actually pipe that in or I look at my comp very quickly, you will see that I have all that detail that is retained all the way around the actual character. And that's pretty much essentially what we need in order to maintain the silhouette. Now that we have that, if I was going to place this mask or this key straight into my character or my element, I will get just something like this. I already did a hue correct, but still we find exactly the same problem, right? That we have this halo edge or anything around it. So what I'm going to do is I went ahead and did a quick filter erode for the shape, just eroding a couple pixels out, all right? And I'm using the box filter. That way I have the least amount of blurring between the edge. And I went ahead and just ate away 1.2 pixels in. So pretty much essentially instead of going way in, I just went 1.2 pixels for that specific purpose. Again, you won't see this on the RGB because I'm working straight on the alpha. So when you look at it, I don't want to eat away too much because then we start getting a thinning effect. And I don't want to use the other filters. Probably the other one actually that would be pretty good will be the quadratic filter. And I don't like the triangle and the Gaussian for this project, but you could use either or, it doesn't matter. And then pretty much we got this point too. We don't not go worry too much about this webbing right now. That's how we know him, because pretty much it's almost 50%, so it's going to go away when we do the final integration. So we're pretty good on that. So 1.2 will be enough for this. We ate enough away, and we kept a nice transparency on the edge, so it helps us on the fall off. But still, that's not going to solve completely the issue. It's going to help us a little bit. Now, after I did that, I went ahead and introduced that into the alpha or the copy node. And what we do with the copy node is we take the original footage, so we retain the whole information of the original footage itself. We go ahead and we do, I will talk a little bit about this guy, but we do a little bit of hue correction in order to fix the hue or issues that we have on the actual mat. So pretty much it will look all green when we actually are done. So we went ahead and did a basic hue correct, where I went ahead and adjusted my green suppression and I removed the green from those areas. And then I went ahead and I took the pry mat, applying another filter erode to it, and I connected that into a saturation node. And this will allow me to actually desaturate those edges a little bit more. Let me show you what it does. So when I hit 1 here, right, I went ahead and then the input mask, I inverted it. So that means this filter erode that is going to the saturation again, I'm on this part of the pipeline, is actually desaturating the inside. Now, right now, I'm not doing too much to it, but let's see what happens when I actually take the saturation down. So if you would like to actually work with the saturation, if you think it's too saturated along the edge, too red, that will allow you to actually bring back and forth, so allow you to control a little bit more of that edge. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and go very minimal. I'm going to go about 0.7, 0.76 around there, just enough to actually get a little bit of saturation, probably at 0.7, to desaturate that edge just slightly. So it helps me a little bit more on the grading. So now that all that is said and done, like I said before, we took the primat, we added a filter erode, and we applied that to a copy. And what I'm doing is transferring the alpha information that I got from the primat key after I did the edge refinement. And I went ahead and applied that to the original footage where I do the hue correction. Okay? Then I pre-multiply that. So I get the original quality footage. That means all the pixels and everything are original. So therefore, I'm not going to have any loss in quality. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the light wrap in a second. And instead of using a traditional merge over in order to help us on the issue and kind of fix it a little bit better, I'm also going to disable this guy here because that's the right graining. I went ahead and I used an add mix. So the add mix is one of my preferred methods of compositing. Actually, I love this node more than any other on the merging operators, but sometimes we have to use all the other ones because this guy will allow us to actually help us actually merge this areas a little bit easier. So because it's a curve, it allows me to tweak that alpha and how it wraps around the foreground element versus the background. So I'm just telling here to kind of push the values of that alpha a little bit higher, so I'm able to actually kind of eat away and wrap it around the foreground. If we kept it original, how it was from the start, we'll have something to look like that, and that's the halo that you guys are getting. So using this node allows us to kind of do a better blend between the two images, wrapping the foreground around the background. So what I'm doing is I'm just cramming those guys out. It's not going to remove it completely because, again, you're trying to do keeping all that detail, and you're trying to read it this far away, right? So the idea is to make sure that you can read it still, but you're fooling the eye, so it doesn't look as dark. That's how it looked before, and that's what you did after. So you see, a lot of that information now is we're getting rid of, and that's a pretty important step right there. So that helps you on the first part. A lot of people are too kind of, losing a little bit of detail here, a little bit of detail there. You don't have to worry about that. If you get the overall shape and the shape looks good and we still have silhouette, and that's what we have in here, we haven't lost the little details of the silhouette, we're good. Now, a lot of you are trying to retain also the other side. And one of the key elements for the other side that I did was moving up from the add mix, and how you saw how I mixed it. I completely forgot one part. On the add mix as well, what I'm doing also is I'm taking this side as well, the A side, whatever is on the A input in this case, and I'm trying to wrap it also around. So I'm moving the alphas on both sides, comparing both images to kind of help me on that. So I'm also moving the curve up. So now moving to this side, you will see that before the alpha gets copied into the stream, I'm using a roto. And what is this roto for? Well, when I'm doing the filter erode, I just want to erode one side, the one that has the problem. I don't want to destroy the other detail on the other side. I just want to keep this side intact. So what I did is, I went ahead and created a roto, a very quick roto, that pretty much encompasses the head up to the hair at the bottom, and the side that I want to keep all the detail in. Now that I have that, what I did on the filter erode is I connected that roto as a mask, and because I selected this area, I'm going to invert my mask so it only selects the area opposite to what I selected. So this is excluded and this is included. So let's see what happens with the alpha as soon as I do that. So if we disable the erode, you're going to see that the only area affected is that area, the one that has all that halo or the issue. Okay? And that way we can eat away just only that area without affecting the other side. And it's very simple, and it works through the animation as well. So if we hit play, you will see that those shapes actually encompass everything else. So we're actually playing within the animation. We're keeping those shapes that we want to keep the detail on with the animation in place. All right? So that's essentially what happens there. Now that we have all that, there's a couple other things that we tend to add to kind of make our mask even better. So I'm going to go ahead and close the roto so we don't see them. So now that we have all this, we are now done. We finalized the mask, but now we need to go into the integration process, right? And for that, in order to help me even more with that issue that we have in that corner, I went ahead and I created a light wrap node. So just go ahead and hit tab and type light wrap. And the A input I connected to the pre-mult, okay? And the B input I connected to the background image that is coming all the way through. Let me disconnect this guy for now so you guys don't get confused. All right, this is the grain, and I'm going to show you how I match the grain from a film plate. Okay, so pretty much I took the background, and you see what I did was tapped into the stream. Instead of having it connected like this, I just went ahead and created a dot node in the stream and just connected there so I could keep it nice and organized. So my B input is where the information of the light wrap is coming from, and the A input is where I'm applying it to in this case. So that means in this case I'm taking the background and I'm wrapping that background around the foreground. So by having the light bright, you can see how actually that edge actually comes a little bit brighter, kind of faking the direction of the sun and what is happening, giving us a nice halo. So there's a couple of things I did here. I went ahead with a lot of intensity, but you could go with less. And I went ahead and lowered the diffuse. By default, the diffuse is set to about 15. And 15 gives you something like this. And that's not incredibly terrible. Well, let's say it is terrible. But what you're going to do is you're going to go ahead and minimize that effect first and kind of give it a couple pixels wide. You don't want it too sharp, just a couple pixels wide. You get the highlight areas where you need them, right? And then you go ahead and you minimize the intensity a little bit. Just the idea is to fool the eye. It's an optical illusion. So what we want to do is just fool that eye into believing that that area is a lot lighter than it is. And just by being away like that, it actually we fool the eye by just having a little bit of that contrast against the other. Now, the other thing that I do on this little guy is I enable the glow. You're allowed to do so. So you could do 1 or 2. And the glow, what it does is just gives it a kicker. And that's up to you. Again, it's up to you to decide how much you want, how much you need. If you want or if you don't, you could actually turn it on and off. Some of you will like it on, some of you will like it off. It doesn't matter. In this case, it's just illustrating the point. And you guys could decide. All right? So now that we have it there, we're reading all this and we don't see any more of the black halo, even though we still some have those, because it's almost impossible to remove everything without removing the detail that is on the edge, because it's based on the lens and the lens captured this information. And by default, because it's a chemical process, there was some spill towards the sides of either edge. So don't try to be a perfectionist on this point. Try to get as close as possible. To a point that it actually fools your eye and fool the eyes of the viewer. So now that we have this and we added the admix, we added one of the oldest tricks in the book, that is blurring both of them, the background and the foreground, together along that edge of the alpha of the character. And why I say this is the oldest tricks in the book, because this came way, way back in the compositing times when they were doing optical printing and so on and so forth. So and we still apply it today. So what we're going to do here is we're going to do an edge detection node, and you see if I look at it, I'm looking at the color. I need to look at the alpha, and what I'm doing is I'm just detecting the alpha edges. Okay, and don't worry about these. If you get any of these holes, don't worry too much about them. They're not going to show up completely. All right. So what we're doing is we're just detecting the edge. The edge detect will have a threshold. So if you want to remove those holes, you can move the threshold up a little bit, and it will remove any of those holes that you get. All right. And what that does is just takes the alpha channel that you had on this area before it actually gets in, right? That alpha channel, and just calculates around the edge just a couple amount of pixels there. And it gives you an alpha that is actually only that edge. So what we do with that, we take that edge and we create a blur node after we have comped our foreground and our background together. Okay, so after the admix, create a blur node and make sure that the blur node is only affecting the RGB. Okay, after that is said and done, connect that edge detect to the mask of the blur node, and we're using the alpha of that. You don't have to invert it because we're going to affect whatever is on the white area. Let's take a look at the blur node here. And now what we're going to do with this is we're going to take those pixels, those basic pixels in there, and we're going to go ahead and just give it a little. You don't want too much. You just want a very subtle amount, a couple pixels to kind of help on the blending process. And what it's doing is blurring the background and the foreground together and merging those two back and forth. Okay? So it's kind of helping a little bit more on that process. Now I think the saturation here, I went too far in the desaturation. Sometimes saturation trick works, sometimes you probably want to get rid of it. So in this case, probably I want to bring back just slightly. Actually, we could get fully rid of it. Pretty good. 0.98 is good. All right. Again, the illusion. We're trying to calculate that illusion. So far it's looking good. So far it's working well. All right. So we got the blur operation. And then at the end, you do all your integration techniques, right? We put the lens distortion, all these other things. And that's going to help you even more on the edge integration. So what I'm going to do is to kind of start the integration process here and kind of keep it short on this podcast. The first thing that I did was look at the original footage, and I kept all the original of the character itself. So the character has all the original grain, right? So what we need to do is the background doesn't have any grain at all, right? So we need to match that grain. So one of the tricks that I use is I go ahead and I take the green screen and I crop a small section. So let me go ahead and set up the crop so you guys could see. Okay, let me delete it so I could create a new one. So by default, the crop itself is just, it's going to give you a window, right? That is all full. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and just select an area here outside of the character. Okay. And I'm going to say reformat this. And I'm going to look through the crop. And what it did was just chop that section off the video and reformat it to its own little card there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to scan the grain that is on this specific crop here in order to match that grain to the background. And watch what happens. So I'm going to use a tool called the F-regrain. Okay, all of you have it. Just call it F_regrain. If you can't find it there, you will find it on the furnace tools down here. You have the regrain. Okay. So now that you have that, just connect the source input to your background, and the F-regrain, the output, goes to whatever you had connected to that background. Okay. And now we're going to take the grain and we're going to connect that to the crop node. Okay. Now in that crop node, automatically double click on it. If you see, I'm only working with two things at a time, two values at a time, but you could say only one if you want to, but I'm working with two at a time. And I'm going to say double click on the F-regrain, and you're going to get a little grain type here. By default, it's going to be set to preset stock. So if you know the stock or the film that was used, you could actually use one of the presets. If you don't know the film that was used, what we want to do is we want to calculate it based on the grain clip. And in this case, we're using the same clip, the same green screen, in order to be able to calculate that noise that was on the film. So now that we know that, we're going to say analyze. And what it's going to do, that F-regrain is going to analyze the grain that is within this specific image. And it's going to analyze it. And now we're going to be able to actually put it against the background. So let's take a look at the background without it. Let's go ahead and close the crop here. And let's take a look at with the regrain. Now, it's going to say it has changed. If that happens, just click Analyze one more time. All right, and there we go. And this is the grain that was on that film. So we just matched the grain. So now what we're going to do is look at it with the character in there. So you're going to see that the actual character and the grain are matching together. That's pretty good. Okay. And now that we have that, we go through the blur to help on the edges. Okay, blend all those edges in. And then we're going to go ahead and add a little bit of lens distortion if we need to, chromatic aberration, all the other stuff. So I'm going to keep it simple. I'm just going to add a very subtle lens distortion. Again, if we have the information of the lens, we will actually add it to the background because the key, we didn't do any undistort on there. But I'm going to do it overall so we could get a kind of a minute idea. All right, and what is going to happen there. So let's take a look at it. All right. So that's going to help you on the integration even more, right? Of course, I'm going to exaggerate it so you could see what's the effect of that lens distortion. All right. So it's a very subtle distortion. We have a nice integration between foreground and background. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce chromatic aberration, right? And pretty much you can start seeing the integration of the character. And pretty much that gives you a very nice integration of the elements into the background. Again, remember, you're trying to achieve, or what you're trying to achieve is the idea and is the illusion that that character belongs in that background. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to read in 25 frames in this case. That is just 24 actually is a second of film. So we retain all the detail, we retain the hair, we retain all the other elements because we didn't ate away that with the filter erode. We just ate away the area that was giving us the most or the major issue. And now we have a very nice integration between all the elements, giving us that nice final result of the image. Now, this is gonna be posted, of course, in Concept Share. I'm gonna also post it on YouTube. And if you have any other questions about this, again, I have many other different techniques that allow you to be able to pull exactly the same scenario. What I did here was just use the simplest one, or one of the simplest ones. There are other ones out there that are simpler as well, to kind of give you the idea or the illusion. Now you can see here is a little bit too much for my taste. I would like to take it down, but again, very nice look. It looks very nice along the edges. We retain all the detail, and the character is reading really well. And also the grain is working perfectly. It's perfect sync between the two, giving us the rest of the illusion. So that has been it for some tips and tricks, and I hope you enjoy it. So see you on the next one, and any questions, just let me know.